They sent the infertile alien princess to a human as a joke. She came back with twins. Marcus Cole hadn't received a transmission in 43 days. That was fine. Transmissions meant orders, and orders from Central Command meant someone had remembered he existed, which usually preceded something unpleasant. He preferred the silence. Kethara Station orbited a gas giant nobody had bothered to name, positioned at the outermost edge of human-controlled space, like a forgotten sentry post. The kind of place they sent equipment too outdated to scrap and personnel too stubborn to discharge. Marcus qualified on both counts. He was elbow-deep in the guts of a ventilation recycler when the comm panel lit up. Not the standard amber of a routine ping, blue, diplomatic frequency. He stared at it for a long moment, hydraulic grease dripping from his fingers onto the deck plates. "That can't be right," he muttered, wiping his hands on his fatigues before crossing to the console. The uniform had seen better decades. Standard issue earth-tone tactical pants, a faded undershirt stretched across broad shoulders, boots that had been resoled twice. At 34, Marcus carried the lean, hard look of a man who'd spent more time fixing things than breaking them, though his service record proved he was capable of both. Close-cropped dark hair, a jaw that looked like it had been designed for clenching, and gray eyes that missed very little. He tapped the console. The transmission was short, formal, and written in the clipped syntax of Selarion diplomatic protocol. He read it twice, then a third time. The Selarion Dominion, in accordance with Article 9 of the Kethara Accords, was dispatching a royal consort to the human delegation at Kethara Station as a gesture of continued goodwill between species. Marcus looked around the empty station. The flickering overhead lights. The recycler parts spread across the floor. The coffee mug he'd been using for 6 weeks without washing. "I am the human delegation," he said to no one. The shuttle arrived 14 hours later. Marcus had spent most of that time trying to make the station look less like the lair of a man who'd given up on social interaction. He'd managed to clear the main corridor, scrub the guest quarters to something approaching habitable, and put on a clean shirt. Small victories. He watched through the docking bay viewport as the Selarion vessel locked onto the station's port clamps. It was a diplomatic transport, sleek and silver, with the Dominion sigil etched across its hull in iridescent blue. Too expensive a ship for a forgotten station. That bothered him. The airlock cycled open. 4 Selarion guards stepped through first, tall and sharp-featured with skin the color of deep ocean, clad in ceremonial armor that looked more decorative than functional. They moved with the practiced arrogance of people who expected the universe to accommodate them. Then she stepped through. Marcus had seen Selarion women before, in briefings and diplomatic imagery, once in person at a trade summit on Arcturus. They were, as a species, aesthetically striking in ways that made human poets give up and human artists reach for wider color palettes. But this woman stopped him mid-breath. Her skin was blue-violet, deeper than the guards, with a faint luminescence that caught the docking bay's harsh lighting and softened it. Silver-white hair fell past her shoulders in a straight curtain, framing a face built from angles and elegance. High cheekbones, a mouth set in a line that suggested practiced composure, and eyes the color of dark amber that swept the docking bay with the quick assessment of someone cataloging exits. She was dressed simply, a fitted charcoal garment with minimal adornment. No jewelry, no rank insignia. For a princess, she traveled light. What Marcus noticed most was her posture. Straight-backed, chin level, shoulders squared. Not the bearing of someone arriving at a new posting. The bearing of someone walking to an execution and refusing to flinch. The lead guard, a tall Selarion male with thin lips and the permanent expression of someone who'd just tasted something foul, stepped forward. "Human, you are the ranking officer of this installation?" "Only officer," Marcus corrected. "Marcus Cole." The guard's lips twitched. He produced a data tablet and began reading in a tone dripping with ceremony that barely masked contempt. By order of the Grand Council of the Selarion Dominion, Her Diminished Grace, Vaelith Soren Kai, is remanded to the care of the human delegation at Kethara Station, in fulfillment of Article 9, Subsection 7 of the Bilateral Goodwill Accords. Her Diminished Grace. Marcus caught the modifier. In Selarion honorifics, Diminished was a demotion, a public branding. The guard continued, switching briefly to Selarion to address his companions. Marcus's grasp of the language was fragmented, cobbled together from intelligence briefings and late-night study during his posting on the border. But he caught enough. Kethara Station, Baron Stock. Kethara Vaelith. Let the human keep their joke. The words landed like stones in the quiet bay. Vaelith's jaw tightened. A muscle in her neck flexed. But she said nothing. She stared straight ahead at a point somewhere past Marcus's shoulder, her amber eyes burning with something she'd clearly spent years learning to contain. The guards didn't linger. They deposited a single case of personal belongings on the deck, exchanged smirks Marcus was clearly meant to see, and retreated to their shuttle. The airlock sealed. The transport detached with a hiss of releasing clamps, and through the viewport, Marcus watched it shrink into the black. Silence reclaimed the station. Marcus looked at Vaelith. She looked at the deck plates. Her hands were clasped in front of her, knuckles tight, the bioluminescent patterns along her forearms dimmed to almost nothing. "So," Marcus said, "you want the tour? It's short. Basically, this bay, a corridor, and the room where I eat while questioning my life choices." She blinked. Whatever she'd expected from the human, humor wasn't it. Her gaze lifted to his face, searching for mockery and apparently not finding it. "I require nothing," she said. Her voice was lower than he'd expected, musical in the way all Selarion speech carried a tonal resonance, but controlled, measured. "Well, you've got a room either way." Marcus picked up her case. It was lighter than it should have been for someone leaving their entire life behind. "This way." He showed her to the guest quarters. Clean sheets, functional lighting, a viewport overlooking the gas giant's amber bands. Not much, but private. He set her case inside the door. "Messes down the corridor. I eat around 700 and 1900, but the kitchen's open whenever. Water recycler works. Shower works most days." He paused. "If you need anything, I'm usually somewhere making noise with a wrench." Vaelith stood in the doorway, still carrying herself like a woman made of glass, trying not to shatter. "You are not going to ask me anything." "Like what?" "Why I was sent. What I am. What is expected." Marcus leaned against the corridor wall. "I know why you were sent. They wanted to humiliate you and insult us at the same time. Efficient. I'll give them that." His gray eyes held hers without flinching. "What you are is your business, and what's expected is nothing. You're a person, not a package. So get some sleep, eat when you're hungry, and don't touch the panel marked C7 in the engine room, because it shocks you." He turned and walked back toward his ventilation recycler, leaving her standing in the doorway of her quarters. Behind him, so quiet he almost missed it, Vaelith exhaled, a single breath, shaking at the edges, like something tightly wound had loosened by exactly one turn. She didn't come out of her quarters for the first full day. Marcus didn't push it. He made breakfast from ration packs, set a plate and a water container outside her door, knocked once, and went about his work. When he passed by an hour later, the plate was still there, untouched but moved slightly. She'd opened the door, seen it, and closed the door again. The next morning, he did the same thing. This time, the plate came back empty, placed neatly outside her door with the utensils arranged in parallel. Military precision, or royal precision, hard to tell with Selarions. On the second afternoon she appeared. Marcus was underneath the main water filtration unit, cursing a corroded coupling that refused to budge. He heard footsteps and rolled out to find Vaelith standing in the doorway of the maintenance bay, arms crossed, watching him with the expression of someone observing a specimen. "That coupling is fused," she said. "Applying torque will strip the housing." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You know filtration systems?" "I know corrosion mechanics. The alloy they use for this station's plumbing is reactive to the local atmosphere's sulfide content." She stepped closer, kneeling beside the unit. "You need an acid solvent, low concentration. Do you have any citric compound in your rations?" 40 minutes later, the coupling came free. Vaelith's hands were stained with grease and solvent, and something in her posture had shifted. The rigid formality had softened into focus. She was in her element, solving problems, using her mind. You trained as a researcher, Marcus said. Not a question. Xenobiological compatibility, she replied, then seemed to catch herself, as if she'd revealed too much. Before. Marcus didn't push. He handed her a clean rag. Dinner's in 2 hours. I'm making something I loosely call stew. It's terrible, but it's hot. The ghost of something that wasn't quite a smile crossed her face. You are a strange human, Marcus Cole. So I've been told. Over the following days, a rhythm emerged. Mornings, Marcus cooked. Vaelith appeared, ate in silence at first, then with fragments of conversation that grew incrementally longer. He learned that she preferred her water warm, that she slept very little, that when she thought no one was watching, she pressed her palm against the viewport and stared at the stars with an expression that held equal parts longing and rage. He didn't push. He'd spent enough time alone to understand that some walls need to come down from the inside. But the station was small. 2 people in a space built for 6 created a forced intimacy that neither could entirely avoid. They passed each other in corridors, shared the galley, worked side by side when the systems needed attention. And slowly, conversation deepened past logistics. Tell me about your world, she said one evening, seated across from him at the narrow mess table. She'd taken to wearing one of his spare shirts over her Selarion garment. It was too large for her, and something about that struck Marcus in a place he tried not to examine. Earth? He leaned back, considering. Green, loud, overcrowded in places, beautifully empty in others. What do you miss most? The answer came without thinking. Rain. Her brow furrowed slightly. Atmospheric precipitation? Yeah, but it's more than that. The sound of it hitting a roof when you're inside. The smell right before it starts. The way everything looks cleaner afterward. He shrugged. Stupid thing to miss. It is not stupid, Vaelith said quietly. I have never experienced rain. Never? Solaris Prime has a controlled climate. Precipitation is managed, distributed. I have read about natural rainfall, but reading is not experiencing. Marcus looked at her for a long moment. If we ever get off this rock, I'll take you somewhere it rains. She held his gaze. The bioluminescent patterns along her wrists pulsed faintly brighter, just for a second, before dimming again. I would like that, she said. The first time he saw her angry, truly angry, was in the observation bay. Marcus had gone looking for her after she'd skipped dinner, which she never did. He found her sitting on the floor beneath the main viewport, knees drawn up, hands balled into fists, staring at the swirl of the gas giant below. She wasn't crying. Vaelith, he'd learned, did not cry. She burned. Hey, he said, settling onto the floor beside her. Not close enough to crowd, close enough to be present. They erased me. Her voice was flat, controlled, terrifying in its composure. My research, 7 years of work on xenogenetic compatibility. When the diagnosis came, they confiscated everything, reassigned my lab, credited my findings to a colleague who had contributed nothing. Marcus said nothing. He waited. My mother, Vaelith continued, and something cracked in the word. She was the matriarch's rival. When I was diagnosed, my mother stood in the council chamber and said, I have no daughter. Her hands tightened, not because she believed it, because it was politically convenient to disown me before Selene could use me against her. Selene, Grand Matriarch, my father's sister, she orchestrated everything. The testing, the public announcement, sending me here. Vaelith's amber eyes finally turned to him, blazing. She wanted me to disappear, quietly, to become nothing in a place that is nothing, attended by a species she considers barely sentient. The fury in her voice could have stripped hull plating. Marcus let it burn. He didn't try to comfort her, didn't minimize it, didn't offer perspective. He sat beside her and let her be furious, because she'd earned it, and because nothing he could say would be worth more than simply being there. When the silence between them had cooled enough to breathe in, he spoke. You know what I think? I'm certain you'll tell me. I think a society that throws away its best people because of a medical result isn't advanced. It's scared. They didn't erase you because you were broken, Vaelith. They erased you because even without fertility, you were smarter and more capable than the people running the show, and that terrified them. She stared at him, The bioluminescent lines along her neck and collarbone flickered. Once, twice, then steadied at a brightness he hadn't seen before. "You believe that," she said, not a question. "I believe it because I'm looking at a woman who diagnosed my filtration problem in 30 seconds, speaks 3 languages, and survived being stripped of everything without losing herself." He held her gaze. "That's not broken. That's the opposite of broken." Vaelith looked away first. Her throat worked. The luminescence along her skin pulsed in an unsteady rhythm that he'd come to associate with moments when her emotional control fought against something stronger. "Humans," she whispered, and the word was so full of bewildered gratitude that it needed no translation. 3 days later, Marcus sliced his palm open on a sheared conduit panel. The cut was deep, bleeding freely, and he was applying pressure with a rag and considerable profanity when Vaelith appeared, took one look, and took his hand. "Sit down," she ordered. "It's fine. Just a cut. It requires suturing, and you have the medical knowledge of a particularly stubborn rock. Sit." He sat. She retrieved the station's medkit and went to work with a precision that spoke of extensive training. Her fingers were cool against his skin. Not cold. Cool. Like water from a shaded stream. She cleaned the wound, applied a topical analgesic, and began closing the cut with microsutures. "Your cellular structure is remarkable," she murmured, more to herself than to him. "The clotting factor alone. Human blood coagulates nearly twice as fast as Selarion. Is that good?" "It is efficient." She was studying his blood with the intensity of someone reading sacred text. "Your species has an extraordinary rate of genetic adaptation, mutation expressed as resilience rather than degradation." Her amber eyes lifted to his. "Among Selarion, such plasticity does not exist. Our genome is stable, rigid." "And rigid means?" "It means we do not change. We perfect or we fail. There is no middle ground." Something flickered behind her eyes. A thought forming. A question she wasn't ready to voice. "Your biology is uniquely flexible, Marcus. More than you realize." She finished bandaging his hand. Neither of them moved to break the contact. His hand rested in hers, warm against cool, human against Selarion. The moment stretched. "Thank you," he said. "You're welcome." She released his hand carefully, as if setting down something fragile. Then she turned away, and Marcus caught the faintest intensification of the bioluminescent patterns along her neck before she disappeared down the corridor. That evening, he taught her poker. She was atrocious at first, too honest in her expressions for a species that valued composure. But by the 4th hand, she'd figured out the principle of the bluff. And by the 7th, she'd cleaned him out of ration credits. "You're a hustler," Marcus said, throwing down his cards. "I am a fast learner," she corrected. And then she smiled. A real one. The first he'd seen. It transformed her face entirely, lighting something behind those amber eyes that made the bioluminescent patterns along her cheekbones glow like captured starlight. Marcus laughed. The sound surprised them both. Vaelith's smile wavered, not fading, but shifting into something more vulnerable, more exposed. "When was the last time someone laughed with you?" he asked, and immediately wished he hadn't, because the answer was written all over her face. "A very long time," she said softly. Vaelith couldn't sleep. The station hummed its mechanical lullaby around her, the constant background noise of recyclers and climate systems that she'd grown accustomed to over weeks. But her mind wouldn't quiet. She sat in the converted storage room that served as her makeshift laboratory, surrounded by the rudimentary medical equipment she'd salvaged and recalibrated from the station's neglected medbay. The data on her screen shouldn't have been possible. She'd run the comparison 4 times. Human genetic markers against Selarion reproductive compatibility indices. The testing framework her own people used, the one that had condemned her, measured only one axis, Selarion to Selarion. Every cell in her body had been mapped, assessed, and judged against the narrow parameters of her own species. And she had failed. But the parameters weren't universal. They never had been. Human DNA moved, that was the only word for it. Where Selarion genetic architecture was crystalline, fixed, locked into patterns that hadn't shifted in 100,000 years, human genetics danced, adapted, reached. Marcus's blood sample, taken from the rag she'd used to clean his wound, showed a cellular plasticity that her scientific mind could barely process. His chromosomal markers didn't just tolerate compatibility variants. They actively bridged it. The fertility testing her people performed measured a Selarion woman's ability to conceive with a Selarion male. Vaelith had failed that test, definitively, irreversibly, but no one had ever tested her against anything else. She stared at the compatibility readout on her screen. The indicators glowed green, not marginal, not borderline, fully compatible. Human Selarion reproductive viability at an index she'd never seen documented in any xenogenetic literature. Because no one had looked. Because her people considered cross-species reproduction not just impossible but culturally obscene. The research had been suppressed before it could begin. Her research, the work they'd taken from her. She'd been so close to asking these exact questions 7 years ago when they'd shut her down. Vaelith closed the display and pressed her palms flat against the desk. Her heart was pounding, not from scientific excitement, though that was there, from something more dangerous, something that tangled the researcher and the woman into a single trembling question she wasn't yet brave enough to ask aloud. She watched Marcus differently after that. She couldn't help it. The scientist in her cataloged everything. The way he moved, efficient and unhurried. The breadth of his hands. The warmth that radiated from his skin in a way no Selarion male produced. The way he looked at her, not with the appraising coldness of Selarion men evaluating worth, but with something steady and uncalculating that she had no framework for. The woman in her noticed other things. The line of his jaw when he concentrated. The quiet competence of his hands on machinery. The way his voice dropped half a register when he was tired. The way he never, not once, made her feel like a charity case. Like something broken that he was generously tolerating. "You're staring again," he said one evening, catching her watching him repair a comm relay. "You have grease on your face." "I always have grease on my face." "New excuse." She looked away, fighting a smile. The bioluminescent patterns along her arms, which she'd spent a lifetime learning to suppress, flickered traitorously. Later that night, they sat in the observation bay. It had become their place. The gas giant below turned its slow amber spirals, and the stars beyond did what stars always did. Burned without caring who watched. "Can I ask you something?" Marcus said. "You consistently do, regardless of permission." "Fair. What did you actually want? Before everything? Before the diagnosis, the politics, all of it? If you could have had any life?" Vaelith considered the question. No one had ever asked her. Not what she was supposed to want, not what was expected. What she wanted. "I wanted to discover something that mattered," she said. "Something that changed how people understood themselves. And I wanted," she hesitated, "I wanted a family, not for political alliance, not for genetic contribution to the bloodline, just for warmth." The word hung between them. "What about you?" she asked. "What did you want?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. "I grew up in a colonial orphanage. Parents died in an atmospheric processing accident when I was 4. Never got adopted. Aged out of the system at 16 and joined the military because it was that or nothing." He scratched the back of his neck. "I always thought I'd have kids someday. Build the thing I never had. But years pass. You get posted to places like this. You stop planning for a future and start just managing the present." "You would be a good father," Vaelith said, and was surprised by how certain she sounded. Marcus looked at her. "What makes you say that?" "Because you left food outside a stranger's door every morning for a week without once expecting her to open it." The silence after that was different, charged, not with tension but with recognition. Two people standing at the edge of something and knowing it. Vaelith moved first. She closed the distance between them on the observation bay bench and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was not urgent, not desperate. It was deliberate. A scientist testing a hypothesis. A woman choosing, for the first time in her life, what she actually wanted. Marcus responded slowly. His hand rose to cup her face, thumb tracing the faint luminescent lines along her cheekbone. He kissed her like she was real and important and not going anywhere. And the patience of it, the unhurried warmth, was so different from everything she'd known that it loosened something in her chest that had been locked for years. When they parted, her bioluminescent patterns were blazing. Every line and constellation on her skin pulsed with amber light that matched her eyes. "Your skin," Marcus murmured. "It does that," she whispered, "when we feel something strongly." "What are you feeling?" She looked at him, and for the first time since arriving on this forgotten station, Vaelith Soren Kai answered a question without thinking about consequences. Alive! The weeks that followed built a world that existed only for two people. They fell into a life without ever formally agreeing to it. Marcus repaired the station. Vaelith converted the storage room into a proper laboratory. They shared meals, traded stories, argued about the optimal temperature for sleeping quarters. A species-level disagreement that Vaelith won by presenting thermal efficiency data. They shared a bed. They shared mornings. He called her Val. She told him it was undignified. She stopped correcting him after the third day. Vaelith noticed the changes slowly, the nausea she attributed to the station's recycled air, the fatigue she blamed on late nights in the lab, the bioluminescent patterns along her skin brightening to an intensity she'd never seen in herself, which she dismissed as atmospheric adaptation or emotional regulation. She was rationalizing. She knew she was rationalizing. The scientist in her recognized the symptoms long before the woman was willing to acknowledge them. She ran the scan on a Tuesday, or what passed for Tuesday on a station with no planetary rotation to mark the days. She sat in her lab, placed the medical sensor against her abdomen, and waited. The readout populated. One heartbeat, her own, a second, small, rapid, a third, identical rhythm, offset by a fraction of a second. Twins. Vaelith stared at the screen until the numbers blurred. Her hands trembled, not from fear, from the violent collision of every truth she'd been told about herself against the undeniable reality pulsing inside her body. She was barren, hollow, worthless, diminished. Those words had been carved into her identity so deeply that she'd stopped fighting them years ago. She'd accepted the verdict the way you accept gravity. It was simply the shape of the universe. And now the universe had changed shape. She found Marcus in the maintenance bay. He was welding a support strut, visor down, sparks cascading around him. She waited until he finished, until he lifted the visor and saw her standing in the doorway. His smile started automatically, the way it always did when she appeared. Then it faltered. "What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Marcus." Her voice was steady. Her hands were not. "I need you to sit down." He sat on an overturned crate, concern etching lines across his forehead. She crossed the room and took both his hands in hers. "I'm pregnant." He blinked. "Twins." The silence lasted 3 heartbeats. She counted them. And then Marcus Cole, the forgotten man on the forgotten station, the orphan who'd never had a family, did something that rewrote every expectation she'd spent a lifetime building. He smiled. Not confusion, not shock, not the careful calculation of consequences that a Selarion male would perform. Joy, pure, stupid, overwhelming joy that flooded his face like sunrise hitting a dark ocean. His hands tightened around hers and his eyes went bright with moisture he didn't try to hide. "Twins?" he repeated, his voice cracking on the word. "The scan is confirmed. 2 distinct heartbeats. Marcus, do you understand what I'm saying? This should be impossible. My diagnosis was definitive, but human genetic plasticity, your cellular markers, they bridge the compatibility gap that Selarion biology couldn't cross. Your DNA adapted to mine. It found a pathway that shouldn't exist." He wasn't listening to the science. He was pulling her onto his lap, wrapping his arms around her, pressing his face against her neck. His whole body was shaking. "Marcus," she whispered, her composure finally breaking. "Say something." "I'm going to be a father," he said into her hair. "We're going to be a family." And Vaelith cried. For the first time since she was a child being told she was deficient. For the first time since her mother turned away. For the first time since they loaded her onto a shuttle and sent her to the edge of nowhere as a punchline. She cried and Marcus held her. and the station hummed around them like it had finally found its purpose. Later, in the quiet dark of their quarters, he lay with his palm flat against her stomach while she explained the science. The xenogenetic compatibility, the chromosomal bridging, the unprecedented nature of what their bodies had accomplished without laboratory intervention or genetic modification. "Among my people," she said, "twins are sacred, extraordinarily rare. One birth in 100,000? They'll call it impossible." "Let them call it whatever they want," Marcus said. His thumb traced a slow circle against her skin. "I call it ours." She turned to face him in the dark. Her bioluminescent patterns were glowing at an intensity she'd never produced before. Bright enough to illuminate his face, bright enough to light the room. "I spent my entire life being told I was hollow," she said. "Empty. I believed it. Even when I hated it, I believed it. And now," her hand covered his on her stomach, "now I am the fullest I have ever been." They had 11 weeks of peace, 11 weeks of mornings and meals, and Marcus talking to her stomach in a voice Vaelith pretended to find ridiculous, but secretly recorded on her datapad. 11 weeks of preparation and quiet joy, and the slow realization that they'd built something real in a place designed for nothing. The Selarion inspection vessel dropped out of hyperspace without warning. Marcus was reviewing supply manifest when the proximity alert screamed to life. He reached the command console in 4 strides and felt his stomach drop. "Val," he called over the internal comm. "Get to the command center, now." She arrived within minutes, her expression shifting from confusion to recognition as she saw the vessel's registry code on the display. "That is a Dominion diplomatic cruiser. Why would they send a diplomatic cruiser for a routine inspection? Because it's not routine?" The docking request came moments later. Marcus granted it because refusing would trigger an automatic escalation. The airlock opened and Commander Rethus stepped through. The same thin-lipped envoy who delivered Vaelith with a smirk and a slur. He walked the station's main corridor with 2 guards flanking him, his gaze sweeping the space with undisguised contempt. Then his eyes found Vaelith and he stopped walking. Marcus watched the sequence of expressions cross Rethus's face in rapid succession. Confusion, recognition, disbelief. The commander's eyes dropped to Vaelith's midsection, where the bioluminescent patterns had intensified to a brightness that any Selarion would recognize instantly. The constellation patterns of a pregnant woman blazed across her skin like a declaration. "This is not possible," Rethus said. His voice was barely a whisper. "And yet," Vaelith replied. The commander's composure reassembled itself into something colder, more dangerous. "You will accompany me to the Dominion for evaluation. Immediately." "She won't." Marcus stepped forward, positioning himself between Rethus and Vaelith with the casual deliberateness of a man who decided exactly where the line was and dared someone to cross it. Rethus looked at him the way one might look at furniture that had developed opinions. "This does not concern you, human. Everything on this station concerns me, especially her." The commander's lip curled. "You bred with her, like an animal, and you think this entitles you to interfere with Dominion affairs? I think it entitles me to protect my family." Marcus's voice was quiet, even, the kind of quiet that preceded storms. "Touch her and find out what that means." Rethus's guards shifted, hands moving toward weapons. The air in the corridor compressed with tension. Vaelith stepped forward, placing herself beside Marcus rather than behind him. "Commander Rethus," she said, and her voice carried a resonance Marcus hadn't heard before. Regal, commanding, the voice of a princess who'd remembered her title. "I invoke the sovereign blood right. As a member of the royal bloodline carrying recognized offspring, I am protected from seizure under the founding charter. You know this law. That law hasn't been invoked in centuries. It has never been revoked. Attempt to take me, and the legal precedent will reach the High Court before your ship clears the system. How will Grand Matriarch Selene react when her personal errand triggers a constitutional crisis?" Rethus stared at her. The calculation behind his eyes was almost audible. He wanted to act. Every line of his body strained toward it. But the political risk was real, and men like Rethus survived by calculating odds, not by courage. "This will be reported," he said finally. "I expect nothing less." The commander turned on his heel. His guards followed. At the airlock, he paused without turning back. You have changed nothing, Vaelith. The Dominion does not acknowledge abominations. The Dominion, Vaelith replied, does not get to decide what my children are. The airlock sealed. The cruiser detached. Marcus and Vaelith stood in the corridor and watched through the viewport as the Selarion vessel accelerated away. How long do we have? Marcus asked. Days. A week at most. Rathis will report directly to Selene. She will not invoke the blood right challenge through legal channels. She will send a warship. Then we need to move. Marcus was already heading for the command console. I'm transmitting a priority distress signal on Earth Alliance military channels. If anyone out there still remembers I exist, there is something else you need to understand. Vaelith followed him, her expression grave. This is not simply about me. If the Dominion acknowledges that human Selarion reproduction is possible, it threatens the foundation of their entire social structure. Marcus paused. Explain. The fertility caste system, it is how the Dominion controls its population. Women are ranked by reproductive capacity. Those deemed infertile are stripped of status, property, voice. They become the lowest class, servants, invisible. Her amber eyes burned. There are millions of us, Marcus. Millions of Selarion women told they are worthless because they cannot conceive with Selarion males. If they learn that compatibility exists with other species, that their infertility was never absolute, the caste system collapses. The ruling matriarchs lose their primary instrument of power. The scope of it hit Marcus like a hull breach. This isn't just about our children. No, our children are proof. Proof that the entire system is built on a lie. Marcus sent the distress signal. Then he started fortifying the station. He'd spent 15 years in military service, and even a forgotten station could be made defensible if you understood angles and choke points. He sealed secondary airlocks, rerouted power to the docking bay's emergency containment fields, and rigged the corridor junctions with improvised deterrents from the maintenance supplies. Nothing that would stop a full assault. Everything designed to slow one down. Vaelith worked beside him. She mapped Selarion armor vulnerabilities from memory, identifying the joints and power conduit locations where even their advanced plating could be compromised. She was methodical, clinical. Every piece of information delivered with the precision of a woman who'd spent her life studying biology and now applied that knowledge to keeping her family alive. You're not what they think you are, Marcus told her as they worked through the night. You know that, right? She looked at him. In the station's emergency lighting, her bioluminescent patterns blazed like a constellation made flesh. I am becoming aware of it, she said. The Dominion cruiser arrived 6 days later. Not a diplomatic vessel this time. A Vanguard-class warship bristling with weapon arrays, carrying enough firepower to reduce Kethara Station to vapor. It emerged from hyperspace like a predator breaking through underbrush, and Marcus felt the station's hull vibrate with the electromagnetic wash of its arrival. The communication request came immediately. Marcus accepted it on the main screen. The woman who appeared was unmistakably Selarion royalty. Older, with the same bone structure as Vaelith, but harder, colder, as if the elegance had been refined into a weapon. Deep blue skin, silver hair cropped close in a military style, and eyes like frozen amber. Grand Matriarch Selene. Niece, she said. Aunt. Vaelith's voice was ice. You have caused considerable inconvenience. I have caused the truth to become inconvenient. Those are different things. Selene's expression didn't change, but something behind her eyes shifted. You will surrender yourself and the genetic material you carry to Dominion Medical Authority. The pregnancy will be terminated. The data will be classified. You will be reassigned to a facility where your condition can be monitored. No, this is not a negotiation, child. You're right, it's not. I am invoking sovereign blood right. These children are of royal lineage. You cannot touch them without violating the founding charter, and you know it. The charter, Selene said slowly, was not written to protect perversions of nature. Marcus stepped into the frame. Those are my children you're calling perversions. Selene regarded him with the detached interest one might show an insect that had learned to speak. The human, I expected something more impressive. Sorry to disappoint, but if you try to board this station, you'll discover humans are full of surprises. Bravado, how predictable. Selene's attention returned to Vaelith. "You have 1 hour to comply. After that, I will take what I came for." The screen went dark. Marcus was already moving. "How many soldiers on a Vanguard class?" 40 combat personnel, plus crew. "Against 2 of us. I've had worse odds." He hadn't, but the lie felt necessary. The boarding parties came in 2 waves. The first hit the main docking bay, cutting through the emergency containment fields with military-grade plasma torches. Marcus met them in the corridor junction he'd prepared, using the station's narrow passages to neutralize their numerical advantage. Pulse rifle fire lit the dim corridors in strobing, blue-white flashes. Selarion soldiers were fast and disciplined, but they fought in formations designed for open ground. In the tight confines of Kethara Station, Marcus's close-quarters experience was the equalizer. He dropped 3 in the first engagement, took a graze across his shoulder that burned like hellfire but didn't stop him, fell back to the secondary position, drawing them deeper into the station's maze of maintenance corridors where Vaelith had disabled the overhead lighting and rigged chemical deterrents from lab supplies. Selarion eyes were sensitive to specific wavelengths. The flash compounds she'd synthesized turned that sensitivity into a liability. "Second wave breaching through airlock 4? Vaelith's voice came through his earpiece. Calm, steady, guiding him through the station systems like she'd been running combat operations her entire life. "Can you seal it?" "Already done." "Rerouting atmospheric pressure to create a vacuum lock. They will need to cut through manually. That buys us 4 minutes." 4 minutes. Marcus reloaded, checked his wound, and moved to intercept. The fighting compressed into a brutal sequence of ambushes and retreats. Marcus used every trick 15 years of military service had taught him, and several the manual would have frowned upon. But they kept coming. More soldiers than the station's corridors could absorb, pushing forward through casualties with the mechanical determination of an empire that had never learned to accept refusal. A breach in the inner corridor. 3 soldiers broke through the secondary barricade. Marcus engaged 2, dropping them with controlled bursts. The third got past him. He heard the pulse rifle discharge from around the corner. Then silence. He rounded the junction and found Vaelith standing over the fallen soldier, a weapon in her hands, her face set in an expression that could have been carved from stone. Her bioluminescent patterns blazed like fire. "He's alive," she said. "I targeted the armor joint. He'll regain consciousness in an hour." Marcus looked at her, pregnant, wounded, a cut across her forearm where debris had caught her. Standing in a corridor of a dying station with a rifle she'd never been trained to fire, defending children that her entire civilization had said shouldn't exist. He'd never seen anything braver in his life. "You're incredible," he said. "I am motivated." She handed him the rifle. "Also, your signal was received." "What?" The station shuddered. Not from weapons fire, from something larger. Through the nearest viewport, Marcus saw them. 2 Earth Alliance frigates materializing from hyperspace, their angular hulls catching the gas giant's light. The lead vessel's identification beacon flashed across his console. EAS Resolute. Captain Alara Voss commanding. Voss, his former CO. The woman who'd fought to keep him in service when command wanted him gone. She'd pushed for his reassignment to Kethara instead of a discharge. At the time, he'd resented it. Now he understood it for what it was. She'd put him somewhere quiet until the universe needed him again. The Resolute hailed the Dominion warship. The exchange was brief. 2 Alliance frigates outgunned a single Vanguard cruiser, and Selene, whatever her fury, understood mathematics. The Selarion warship withdrew. The boarding parties fell back to their shuttles, and as the enemy vessels retreated to a safe distance, Selene's final transmission played across the station's speakers. "This changes nothing, Vaelith. The Dominion will never acknowledge those children." Vaelith stood in the damaged corridor, one hand resting on her stomach, and watched the warship shrink against the stars. "She is wrong," she said quietly. "This changes everything." Aboard the Resolute, the medical team descended on Vaelith with the enthusiastic urgency of professionals encountering something unprecedented. Scanners hummed, data accumulated. 2 heartbeats, strong and steady, confirmed on equipment far more sophisticated than the station's salvaged medbay. "Human Selarion hybrids," the chief medical officer murmured, reviewing the genetic analysis. First documented case in galactic history. The chromosomal bridging alone will rewrite 3 textbooks. The data will not be classified, Vaelith said from the examination table, her tone leaving no room for discussion. It will be published, openly, with full methodology. The doctor looked to Captain Voss, who stood in the doorway of the medical bay with her arms crossed, and the expression of a woman who'd stopped being surprised by Marcus Cole's life choices approximately never. "You heard the lady," Voss said. Marcus found Vaelith in the ship's mess hall an hour later. She was eating something from a tray with the focused determination of someone who'd forgotten meals were supposed to involve choices. He sat across from her and took her hand. "So," he said, "what now?" She looked at him. "I cannot return to the Dominion. I don't have a posting to return to. Kethara Station is currently missing several walls. Then we are both without a place." "No." His hand tightened on hers. "We're without a station. We've got a place." Her eyes softened. The luminescent patterns along her skin, still burning brighter than she'd ever known them, pulsed once in a rhythm that matched his heartbeat. "Where?" "Wherever you are. Wherever they are." His thumb traced her knuckles. "I spent my whole life without a family, Val. I'm not losing this one." She lifted his hand and pressed it against her cheek. "Humans," she whispered, "you say the simplest things, and they contain entire worlds." 3 months later, at the Earth Alliance Diplomatic Summit on Kethara Station, the Selarion Dominion was formally confronted with the genetic evidence. Vaelith's research, rebuilt from the ground up and corroborated by Alliance scientists, proved that Selarion infertility classifications were species-specific. Millions of women deemed hollow were biologically capable of conception through cross-species compatibility. The political shockwave was immediate. Within weeks, underground networks of infertile Selarion women began organizing. Messages spread through encrypted channels. The word hollow was reclaimed, repurposed, turned from a brand of shame into a banner of defiance. Vaelith, without intending it, had become a symbol. She gave birth on a Tuesday, or whatever passed for Tuesday on Kethara Station. Twin girls. The first drew breath and screamed with human lungs, a sound so loud the medical team flinched. The second arrived 90 seconds later, quieter, her tiny fist already gripping the doctor's finger with a strength that made the woman laugh in surprise. Marcus held them, one in each arm, blue-violet skin with warmth underneath, amber eyes flecked with his gray, catching the light. Bioluminescent patterns already visible along their tiny forearms, faint as starlight through cloud cover. They were impossible. They were real. They were his. He couldn't speak for a full minute. Vaelith watched him from the bed, exhausted and radiant, her own patterns blazing at an intensity that lit the room without artificial help. "Say something," she said. "I can't feel my face," he managed. "I think I'm smiling too hard." She laughed, tired, broken, beautiful laughter. "What are we naming them?" They'd agreed weeks ago. One Selarion name, one human name, chosen together. "Solari," Marcus said, looking at the firstborn. The Selarion word for dawn. "And Lily," Vaelith said, touching the second child's cheek. An earth flower she'd never seen but had read about in Marcus's descriptions of rain and green worlds and things that grew toward light. Captain Voss visited the next day. She stood in the doorway of the medical suite and looked at Marcus holding a baby in each arm while Vaelith slept, and her expression cycled through approximately 9 emotions before settling on something suspiciously close to tears. "You absolute disaster of a man," she said softly. "You went and built a family on the worst posting in the galaxy." "Best posting," he corrected. "Turns out." 2 weeks after the birth, Vaelith addressed the galaxy. She'd been asked to deliver a statement through a Selarion cultural broadcast network that had recently broken from Dominion censorship control. The transmission would reach every Selarion colony, every refugee outpost, every hidden enclave of women who'd been told they were nothing. She sat before the transmitter in the Alliance's communication center. Marcus stood just off camera, holding Solari. Lily was in Vaelith's arms, asleep against her chest. The recording light activated. Vaelith looked into the lens. And when she spoke, her voice carried the resonance of a woman who had been silent for a very long time and had decided definitively to stop. My name is Vaelith Soren Kai. Many of you know my designation. Hollow, barren, diminished. I was tested at maturity and judged unfit by the parameters of a system that measured my worth in a single dimension and found me lacking. She paused. Her amber eyes held the lens like a blade. They sent me to a human as a joke, a throwaway gesture to a throwaway species on a station at the edge of nowhere. They expected me to disappear, to confirm through my silence that I was exactly what they said I was. Vaelith looked down at Lily, sleeping peacefully. The bioluminescent patterns across her skin blazed with a steady, unwavering light. Instead, I fell in love with a man who saw me before he saw my diagnosis. I conducted the research my own people forbade, and I conceived 2 children that every authority in the Dominion swore were impossible. She looked up again. I am speaking to every woman who was ever told she was hollow. Every woman stripped of her name, her work, her future, because of a test that measured only one narrow definition of worth. You are not broken. The system that judged you is broken, and I am proof. Marcus stepped into the frame. Not planned, not scripted. He simply moved to stand beside her, Solari cradled against his shoulder, because that was where he belonged. Vaelith looked at him. He looked at her. 2 people who'd found each other in a place designed for forgetting, holding 2 children the universe said couldn't exist. They sent me to a human as a joke, Vaelith said, turning back to the lens one final time. I came back with a family. The transmission ended. The broadcast went live, and across the galaxy, in hidden rooms and refugee camps and the quiet quarters of women who had spent their lives believing they were empty, something began to change. It started, as the best revolutions do, with the truth.